I have your interest, I take it, and expectation. The next session, as you can see, is best practices in STEM education and career encouragement programs. I'm really pleased to introduce two people who I have a lot of respect for, again, because of accomplishment. It's easy to preach the mission. It's a whole lot different when you're actively involved in it. Bob Burga is the Executive Director of the Alliance for Science and Technology Research in America. This is an organization that represents R&D in our country, which is fundamental to research and fundamental to our economy. And his members are critical to the rite of passage of our students. He is joined today by Ronnie Lowenstein, who's Astra's Senior Advisor and Futurist. I don't know how many of you know, but this year, Astra released a publication that is the combined work of these two. That publication is EdTech, a revolution in education. I heartily endorse, once again, a publication. This is a compendium of very interesting information on a very stimulating yet confusing aspect of educational transition. I'm going to leave it to the two experts to explain the answer to the riddle, since I've so clearly stated it, and I give you my friend Bob Burga and Ronnie Lowenstein.
Thank you very much, Ed. And before I begin, I want to especially recognize my college options and their crew for the wonderful job they have done in bringing us together. I think this might be my fourth. It's incredible, though, to have such talent assembled in the same room. And it's part of our theme today, where we want to talk about not just coming together, but staying together, communicating, collaborating, engaging with one another. So very quickly, I thought if we could, we're going to start with Ryan Muntz going through his part of the program, and we are going to then segue back to the EdTech revolution in education and then talk a little bit about collaboration and what we do in terms of action steps. So at this moment, I would like to represent Ryan Muntz.
Thank you, Ed. Thank you, Bob. My role here in this session is really to preach to the choir a little bit, to really establish the importance of STEM education, career encouragement. This is a particular portion of the world that we at My College Options have become particularly passionate about in the last several years. If you were at last year's event, we spent quite a bit of time focused on really the pipeline in STEM education. Several years ago, we noticed a trend in students from 8th grade through 12th grade seeing really massive attrition away from an interest and engagement in these particular disciplines. And so it kind of became a crusade of ours. And this session today is really designed to start really discussing solutions in a way that we've not been able to in the past. We were able to do some really tremendous research with our friends at Astra, as well as an organization called STEM Connector, if you're not familiar with them. Really a unique opportunity for us to engage science, technology, engineering, mathematics educators at the middle school and high school level to start understanding the landscape that exists around the point in time, the point in the education career that we've seen this massive attrition pattern over the last several years. And that's the purpose of this talk. To put some quick numbers behind it, a significant amount of students, almost a quarter of every student that comes into 8th grade and 9th grade, tell us at My College Options that their future path, their future plans include a career and an education focused in a STEM discipline. Less than half of those students are on the same path by the time they get to their senior year in high school. That is a trend that is unlike any other category of career, any other category of discipline that we see across the entire country, across the spectrum of careers, of education paths. And this has stayed consistent for many years as we've continued to track it. To kind of give you a sense of the pattern, we first started looking at this almost 10 years ago in terms of the data side. The high school graduating class of 2009, only 42% of those students that come into high school retain their interest in these careers. The class of 2012, we see a little uptick, but still less than half of these students retain their interest. I know that I don't have to sell you all on the importance of science, of engineer, of mathematics, technology, future careers. Our friends from Astor will spend some time speaking really about the future and about how different our workforce needs to be and will be in the future. And so, from our perspective, serving youth in an education role, it's critically important that we really understand where and why students are getting off of this track. So, the research that we conducted over the last school year with Astra and STEM Connector tells a really specific and kind of a fine story. We asked educators, we showed them these trends that we're seeing, and we asked some simple questions about why. The information we got back was not all common sense. There were some really interesting findings there. Most importantly, kind of at a high level, the two most prominent issues that educators tell us are the reasons that students stray or attrit from these interests are both things we can actually impact. Going into this study, we heard a lot of naysayers telling us that the reason you see this attrition are things like course rigor. They're kids, they just changed their mind, there's nothing you can do. But number one and number two came back as the largest barrier is a lack of information. Students don't understand the career concepts behind these harder courses, these more rigorous courses. Why would I take this advanced science course, this advanced math course that none of my friends are in? What's the connecting dots for me? And so a sheer and simple lack of connection to their future opportunities was the most important reason. The second, course availability. We hear educators telling us at a really surprising rate, our students want to keep going, they want to keep pursuing their disciplines, but our schools just don't have either capacity or availability in the first place of a lot of the actual high school coursework that's required for them to be on track by the time they hit college. And so both of these are impactable by people in this room, by my college options, by so many of us out there. These are both solvable problems. Now, just a couple comments about the actual interest itself. That's what we at My College Options do the most is ask and listen. And again, the interest level itself is high, but we know there's confusion, we know there's misunderstanding, and there's so many unique patterns and unique populations of students that suffer in a very different way from this particular problem. And it's important, I'm going to share one data point that we thought was particularly interesting and really tells a story or establishes a concept that's important for all of us to realize. Male students tell us they need outside the classroom programs at a much higher rate. Female students tell us that they're connecting with their futures in the classroom. And so, it might seem common sense, it might seem simple, but just as kind of a setup, asking and listening where we can actually impact, where we can engage, where we can motivate these students was particularly important to us as we kind of try to set the foundation. So the next set of questions that we began to ask educators was asking them just about the programs themselves. Are there unique resources, efforts, time and energy at the school level being spent to try to connect these dots, to try to, fill in the gaps of information and understanding about what lies ahead for students that have this particular interest set. And only 51% of educators report that there is even such an effort in their school. That was alarming to us. With the national conversation so loud, so prominent about the need to increase interest in STEM careers and education, we were surprised by that. But it got worse. Only about 25%, only about 1 out of 4, said that their program was seeing any signs of success, which, again, alarming. And going into it, one of the other stories we heard on a regular basis were there really isn't a common measure of success or even a common understanding of success in this kind of future planning, future motivation concept. And so that was really an important thing for us to establish. The last point here, only 16% of educators reported that their program had signs of success that they believe are important enough, powerful enough to promote and replicate across other schools. And so, a lot of our team, when we started to see these numbers, reported back or, voiced extreme concern, this is horrible, this will fail. To me, it was actually, in a sense, good news, because there are small pockets of success. There are examples where we can go in, we can really study and analyze what's working, what are those common elements of success, and try to replicate those as much as we can. And so where there is success, it's our mission to find it and replicate it, and that's what we'll be doing over the next few years, and excited to report back on how that's going. So just to wrap up the concept before I turn it back to our friends from Astra, the first and most important thing that we can do, that any of you can do that are engaging with students at this level, encouraging them to persist in their interest. We know from a variety of contexts that it's easier, it's cheaper, it's more efficient, it's more possible to keep students engaged and interested than it is to create interest or engagement. And this is one particular area where we see a really significant amount of interest early on in the student's life cycle, and it's our job to keep it. So we have a couple points here, and as we speak to our friends here in the room, to the folks that are online watching the event, from youth-serving organizations, a similar message that we share with colleges and universities looking to recruit, to build programs in these disciplines. It's incredibly important to have early outreach programs, especially in middle school, early high school. That's when this attrition starts to happen in a meaningful way. Communicate the potential for jobs, for the future. An interesting relationship to a lot of the points that Mandy made about motivation and motivating them now. We've seen some great examples of programs, extracurricular and curricular programs that engage students in what they're passionate about now, that then allow them to connect and stay engaged with the future in a way that, that doesn't just say, hey, take this high-level math course because you'll make more money in the future, but really gives them some immediate reward and excitement about the program, which is a perfect example. Outreach programs for families, getting the family engaged, as you all know, is tremendously important, and especially as it relates to those future careers and plans. Programming around building passion is ultimately the kind of the ceiling message of these types of programs, things that connect something that the student genuinely enjoys today with the skill building that will help them get to where they need to be in the future. And so as I turn it over, the EdTech report, the research, the collaboration that Astra has been doing, and many of you in finding those areas of success and encouraging people to share, to talk, that's the real important mission of the day. Building the foundation for tracking successes and failures and sharing them with the world, When we first started this path of research and evaluation, there was really no repository. There was no place that educators, youth service agencies could go to find out what worked in this world, and that's getting better and better every day, thanks to a lot of our friends. So I'll turn it over, Bob, to you to go through the EdTech report and tell us more of the importance of collaboration.
Excellent.
Take it away.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ryan. And if I can, there we go. Thought I'd like to tell you a little bit about how Astra got into this type of activity. We sort of backed into it. We were founded in roughly the year 2000 based upon our perception of our founding members, which included many scientific and engineering disciplinary societies, universities, and generally speaking industry who were looking at the collapse in R&D funding and looking at sort of the end of the pipeline, not the beginning of it, as many in this room dealing with our youth are concerned about. And we started looking at why is not enough being invested in the R&D enterprise, federal R&D, both basic and applied research. And all of a sudden, as we morphed into an organization that looked at this system of funding, we said, well, wait a minute, we don't have an operative economic theory that explains innovation in the first place. The last we could probably look is the Schumpeter school, the Viennese school, around the turn of the last century. There is no operative theory that can explain the data that we need to make our case. What is the return on investment of an R&D dollar? That led us to all sorts of complex questions and the commitment to have facts-based advocacy in this whole area. Inevitably, it came right down to the very issue that we're confronted with, but at the other side of the pipeline. It's careers. It's the talent pool. It's the ability to find and hire competently trained workers for an advanced economy. And I must tell you that it's our firm belief that it is innovative capacity that will determine the fate of nations and of our globe. And frankly, our country, if you look at most of the metrics that measure this, is not doing the best. It's not failing either. So Astra sort of got into this. We said, well, look, we have to go up on the Hill all the time and plead our arguments. Something that resonates is the people on the Hill want to hear about their congressional districts or their state. So we began by creating state-based report cards on R&D. We soon morphed them into STEM Ed report cards for every state. And we started looking at what valid metrics would we choose. AP and calculus, patent production, where would you start? Well, we tried to start, we had about 53 metrics. That's where we met up with My College Options and NERCRUA, which had this treasure trove of data that we thought, oh my God, look at the interest in STEM. They've broken it down by ethnicity, by gender, by age groupings. This is fascinating stuff. And all of a sudden, that's where our engagement and partnership began about 6 years ago. And since that time, we get hundreds of thousands of downloads of these. They're very salient. We put a face on what the R&D means, but also what the innovation means and what the future means. So we've been so pleased. There is a publication called Where Are the STEM Students, Where Are the STEM Jobs? And basically Ryan and Sarah and the team at MCO made an incredible effort at describing this data state by state. Where are the STEM students? And I urge you to look at that. We can provide you an executive summary for free, but it is available at the store.usinnovation.org. And we also have Where Are the Jobs? And we did that state by state to show where the future is. We've used projections from the Bureau of Labor Statistics out to 2018. As you know, those get updated periodically. I think we're up to the year 2021 now. But we're very, very pleased with this partnership. And as we moved on, we started to look at how our mission and vision were going to have to change. We then began this evolution and expanded our focus, which would integrate the policy problems we were finding with a much broader context, a global context, to look at global R&D, futures, foresight governance. Many of these issues can be dealt with and can be dealt with by many of your groups. So we developed an innovation and STEM education agenda, which we would like to share with you, and central to economic prosperity would be the innovation imperative. That's everything that has to do with our future and the kids that many of you are dealing with. One thing that more or less astonished us in our studies, though, was the concept of the Internet of Everything, and that was very well defined by Cisco. Cisco Foundation has funded a great deal of our work, but I would urge all of you to go and look up, just Google, as they say, the verb, Google Internet of Everything, and look at the astonishing capacity and what is happening in this area, and why it's a very exciting time to be alive and to look at what might happen. The Internet of Everything brings together people, process, data, and things to make networked connections more relevant and valuable than ever before. It turns information into actions that create new capabilities, richer experience, and unprecedented economic opportunity for businesses, individuals, and countries. As more things and more people and data become connected, the power of the Internet itself, which is essentially a network of networks, if you think about it, it grows exponentially. Remember the Moore's Law we talked about with the reduction of computing capacity on chips? Well, there's a Metcalfe's Law that I think you might find interesting if you don't know of it already. But a well-known technologist who was a founder of 3Com, remember them, the Palm and all that? He stated that the value of a network increases proportionately to the square of the number of users. Put simply, 1 + 1 = 3. And if you understand what's happening before us, and probably in this room, how many devices do you suppose are already connected in this room? Your smartphones, your tablets, whatever you have, you are a node in a massive, massive network of computational capacity. And by combining people, process, data, and things, the exponential power of the Internet will allow us to create exponential responses to the extraordinary challenges faced by individuals, businesses, and countries. And this applies to education, and our kids, and our classrooms, and our teachers, and us, our organizations. So, understanding that connectivity and the potential of it helps us prepare for the future. Simply stated, the more you can prepare for that future, the better off you will be when it does arrive. And here are several thought-provoking questions I'd like to get you started and to continue our discussion. One, how do we set priorities to match the opportunities that will exist in a connected world of the Internet of Everything? How will your organization fit into that, your company, your school? How should an organization be structured around information and processes? 3, how would governance, control, and responsibility change for your organization in this Internet of Everything world? I think many of us are confronted by the silo problem. You know, we have excellent things going on. We have 700,000 things that we can Google. Who's going to go to the 700,000th entry and actually read it? In fact, does it exist? I don't know. I usually go 3 or 4 pages and say, I think I've seen enough. I hope the algorithm has ranked by relevance whatever my search parameter was. But we're overwhelmed by this information, and yet it is there. And so selectively and intelligently navigating this system presents incredible opportunities for all of us. And fourth, how would I or my organization or business get engaged and effectively connected to this Internet of Everything? So I've left you with a lot of questions. Think about those because it's all around us. And in that context, I would like now to talk a little bit about EdTech Revolution in Education, the 2013 report. So folks, welcome to the revolution. You've been in it for several years. Perhaps many of you are aware of it, but the general populace is not. And welcome to the future. And with that, I'm going to turn this over to Dr. Ronnie Lowenstein, who has recently come on board. She's a tremendous asset to Astra and to our community. Ronnie is both a futurist, an educator, a former teacher. She's been involved on the Hill. She worked for Major Owens and for Congresswoman Diane Watson. And Ronnie is a driving force. She has networks and contributors. Many of you know her from past incarnations, and she has brought such energy to this study. And I'd like her to tell you a little bit about it, and then we'll continue our conversation. Thank you.
I'm loving this I'm loving meeting you, and I'm inspired by the passion and commitment that you have to youth and the frameworks that are guiding you, frameworks of youth development, but also frameworks of community organizing. I've been an educator 47 years, and I've done research, policy, and practice, and in meeting Bob and getting involved with the work and the evolution of ASTRA, I've been re-energized. Our book is based on some belief systems that we were told how important belief systems are. And yes, we're living in a state ed tech revolution, because as all of us are aware, and our youth, who are the millennials, we live in this tumultuous time of revolutionary change. It seems that technology that propelled us through an agrarian society into an industrial society, into a post-information age, has created discomfort. It's disorienting. The accelerated pace of change is very disorienting. The rapidly evolving technologies are something that our millennial youth are more comfortable with than their learning guardians. And that's something else. A colleague, the head of PBS, Paula Kerga, used the term learning guardians, and I have appropriated it. And I think that that those of you committed to youth and youth development will appreciate that, because it's not what happens in school. It is what happens 7/24. It is what happens, the people and the activities and the organizations in the community, the after-school programs. These are the programs that touch the hearts and minds and then the behaviors of our youth. So the technologies that make so many dramatic changes in the way that people think, work, and play may increase productivity, but also unease. And these thoughts and feelings were prophesized a long time ago. Whoops, I think I need to go back. Were prophesized, you had Alvin Toffler in the 1970s with his book, Future Shock, how individuals would feel as they were subjected to waves of change that would come faster and faster. Too much change in too short a time. Then, a couple of years later, in '82, John Nesbitt wrote a book called Megatrends. He detailed the restructuring, the fundamental restructuring of American society from an industrial age to a postmodern age of services and information, and he characterized it as living between the parentheses. Several years later, education historian Harold Shane observed that rapid change had thrust society past Toffler's future shock into a state of hyperturbulence. I was writing a doctoral dissertation in 1983 on interactive technology, multimedia, and schooling, and I wanted to quote, in '87, I was finally getting to the chapter writing, I wanted to quote Harold Shane, and my committee would not allow me to use the term hyperturbulence. They said it's too abstruse, nobody would understand it. And yet I think everybody in this room is suffering and experiences the term hyperturbulence. And then in the early '90s, I discovered a neat lady from MIT, Sherry Turkle. And she observed that we're poised between the second and third wave of civilization and coined a term, the liminal moment, a time in which things are between and betwixt, and where old structures have broken down and new ones have not yet taken their place. And this period of time that we're living in is the liminal moment. And we all are struggling as individuals to live in this moment and adjust to the changes, and then professionally, we're committed to addressing change in this time frame. So as we struggle with hyperturbulence of living in the liminal moment, trying to keep pace with evolution, emerging technologies, we're challenged to find ways to harness those technologies to improve the environments, the enabling environments, as well as the motivations and learning experiences of our youth so that they will be inspired to aspire to achieve academically, to pursue successful paths of success. And what I firmly believe and have instituted in my youth programs is a commitment to living service on a local, national, and international stage. So this framework is the undergirds our work in getting together, where Astra was commissioned to look at the EdTech revolution and how it was impacting teaching and learning and that. And the book itself is captures the dynamism of technology changes and the stresses and the quivering possibilities of living in the liminal moment. It spotlights champions of EdTech who demonstrate that they have the vision and political will to risk to innovate. And they do so whether it's through policies, through research, through development of devices, and through partnership programs that are shaping the contours of our emerging cyber civilization. When I was working, the term cyber civilization was actually used by Martin Luther King, called a cyber nation, a few weeks before he died. And he talked about science bringing our nation into going through becoming a cyber nation, but needing a brotherhood. And through technology is now giving us the inspiration to create a global ethic and a global brotherhood. You'll see in this report that it's not just a report. We have it in hard copy, but we have an e-book, and it becomes a catalyst. And as you could hear from Bob, and I have a background as a researcher, we are very much impressed with the work that you all are doing and in your various capacities, so that we have evidence-based to support our reflections and our changes and actions that are going to lead to better policies, programs, and basically results. The report is organized by themes, studies, voices from the field, hyperlinked to additional research. It offers a glossary and an index so that you can receive deeper information. And it's based, as I told you, on this idea that we're living in times where it's necessary to reconceptualize what we do and how we do it, and then restructure. We believe that technologies are tools of transformation that are transformative for individuals, for programs, for communities. We believe that communities are going through a redefinition. What does it mean to live in a community? We're living in connected communities, and that's where the Internet of Everything is providing the opportunities for those connections. And we believe that partnerships between the different spheres, the different domains, government, private sector, academia, community-based groups, and youth. Don't leave out the kids. Don't just do to them and for them, but let's get them engaged. That this represents a newer definition of what a community is. So, next, please. Oh, are you turning? Should I do? Oh, okay. I hit the wrong one. Sorry. I might have locked something. Maybe I hit something. Whoops.
I don't do Windows, so I'm not sure what.
Thank you. I'm sorry. Miss Technologist over here.
And it's
I hit something, I
not my
think.
brand.
Oh, why don't you keep talking?
Okay. Well, there's a slide on the chapters. There are 16 chapters, and you will see in the slide, and I know the slides will be up on the website, I'm sure, in various websites. You can take a look as I'm talking about the different chapters, and we brought in experts. We have over 98 contributors from around the world. This book is not obviously a it cannot be totally comprehensive. In fact, it's almost embarrassing. We don't have youth development organizations to spotlight, and we hope to do better in this next edition, and we will hope to work with you to find ways to collaborate and spotlight the extraordinary work that you as individuals and as you collectively have contributed and create. You can see that we're looking in higher education, career education. We're concerned about ed tech powered by big data, ed tech and innovation, devices, the maker movement, so exciting. Gaming is so exciting to us, lifelong learning, etc., and equity. I've done a lot inspired by in the 90s by my concerns with the digital divide. And so the concerns of equity continue, not only because we still have not only technology digital divides, we have participation divides. You can even give technology to communities that are impoverished, and that doesn't mean that conditions are equal. So we need to look at the participation divide, and not just locally in the United States, because there is digital divide around the world. So, and we have a chapter that we just love, Ed Tech and Our Global Future, because we firmly believe that while we work in the here and now and in our local communities, we must prepare our youth for this increasingly webified world, an increasingly scientific world, increasingly global, a world that is increasingly interconnected without borders.
I got it for you. I've got it for you.
Okay. And okay, a very quick, I'm more interested in the conversations and the responses, so I'm going to try to go through this very quickly. We just sort of spotlighted 5 themes that are throughout the book, and one of them is, why is this very important? We're living in the liminal moment. I think I spoke enough about that. But the globe that you see and the 15 global challenges have been identified by not only the United Nations going way back 17 years ago, but about 16 years ago, a group from the UN created their own nonprofit called the Millennium Project. And it is really important. John Glenn and Ted Gordon, these are futurists who are world-class, world-famous. And they set up nodes around the world in about 49 countries and sites in which they do research using a variety of futures methodology, and they address the 15 global challenges. And you can see the issues that are so critical. We talk about jobs, we talk about STEM, but what is the world? And we're really preparing kids for a world and jobs that we don't even know. I mean, 2 years ago, we didn't have Twitter. Then they just went, 2 weeks ago, they went public. I mean, things are just rapidly changing. So the sustainable development, the climate change, clean water, population and resources, democratization, ICT, information communication technology, the gap between the rich and the poor, gender issues, health issues, peace and conflict, et cetera, et cetera. This Millennium Project is a major source for capturing what's happening around the world on the issues that are most significant and affect us. And if we are going to cultivate leaders of the future, they need to understand the nature of the world, and this Millennium Project gives you quick snapshots of perspectives that are global. Theme 2, broadband. The broadband is key to innovation, and we're fortunate in the last 4 years, the Obama administration has had an aggressive broadband strategy. But the important thing to know at the moment is no matter what you're doing in your home and in your community and your work, you need the best broadband so that you can connect. And this is whether you're addressing energy, environment, education, government, economic opportunity, or our public safety is, which has really hit home in the last number of months in security, both locally in schools and community, at the White House or Congress yesterday. We need to have the best broadband that's going to give us the capabilities of connecting and securing information and resources. Theme 3, please. This is the one that's probably most directly relevant and makes my heart go pitter-patter. No matter what level of activity I engage in, whether as a researcher, a policy person, or as a learning guardian, educator practice, the one that I guess comes from we're talking about, how you got started, love of youth, and this is, we need to develop our youth, not just for jobs, to slot them into a job, but we want to develop them as citizens and global citizens. Yes, they should be STEM-enabled learners. Whether they go into STEM fields or not, they need to be able to understand the increasingly scientific, technological world and make decisions in their life and vote things that are related, literacy, STEM literacy is required. And what we got at this morning was getting to the youth as the learners as well as the leaders and people in their career path. And in the 90s, when I was working nationally and actually doing my work with communities, I had the opportunity to work with Major Owens at the Congressional Black Caucus, and it dawned on me that I've been putting on all of these programs on the Hill about kids, and I wasn't doing it with kids. So as I was writing my letters for trying to get sponsorship, out of my fingers came unique opportunity. Who will fund? And Next Generation of Youth came out of my fingers. And so what started out as an initial one-shot program, we brought 83 kids in from underserved communities to address the digital divide and participate and develop their civic engagement and act as cyber journalists, learning from community, national community, learning from people who looked like them about issues that affected them now and in their future. Well, that grew into a program that is now worldwide, small but worldwide. And the impact that the kids had on the Hill was so great that the Secretary of Commerce called me in my home 2 weeks later and said, I heard you had cyber journalists cover, on the Hill, and he asked me to bring them back for the Digital Divide Summit, a 3-day summit in Washington in '99. Well, I didn't have kids. I had to bring back kids, and it was, really interesting. But what happened it sort of grew with benign neglect. The programs grew in local communities, and I would help communities all over the country that were working with youth. And what happened, the goal of this was to inspire the youth to engage in civic activity and empower them with the 21st century skills of global competencies, skills that was more than what we traditionally do in schools, and then encourage them to commit to service. And then those little balls down there are the profiles. We want students who are going to be academically prepared. They're going to have the 21st century skills. They're going to be culturally sensitive, civically engaged, and so forth, and that they have proficiency with using the tools that are the basic skills of our time. In Roman times, to be literate meant to be an orator. Then it became to be literate meant reading and writing. To be literate in this age means that we need to be able to manipulate the symbol systems of our times, which is the media and symbol. Theme 4, Bob talked about the Internet of Everything, and it's creating connected communities. And you and we have an opportunity to do that going forward. 5, please. reimagining education in an increasingly interconnected world. And I congratulate all of you who are here, who are daring to risk, to reimagine learning. Our book spotlights these 98 champions from research, policy, and practice who have dared to risk and try to reimagine what we can do. And this is an invitation, and I won't go through the poem, but this poem invites you to join us in a global community of practice. If you share a conviction, a commitment to catalyzing change and creating technology-rich environments, if you share a conviction that our peace on earth prosperity depends on leaders capable of addressing global, of designing global solutions to global challenges, then consider ways to join us, shape the contours of the emerging cyber civilization, harness technology as a tool of communication and collaboration. We ask you to join us and make sure that we engage practitioners as designers of 21st century learning, help us in this transformation of education environments, learning environments, community environments, and make sure that we inspire our students to think of themselves as leaders and learners, civically engaged, culturally aware, empowered with global competencies, and dedicated to shaping a global future. Last slide. And Bob and I are just thrilled to be here. And we are dedicated to working with NCRUA and National Collaboration for Youth and all of you to ask the question, what kind of synergies can we create? What can we do together that we cannot do alone? How can we ensure that we tap your individual and collective wisdom to create collective impact? And now we open it to your questions, and we hope that we will continue to work with you and create active communities of practice. Thank you.
What we're going to do is, because we are running a bit behind, we're going to ask questions over the break. You're going to have lunch over the break. We might look at it as nutritional gravitation towards gratification as part of the theme. What I ask you to do, because there's a lot that we've covered this morning already, is related to yourselves, related to what your work is, how you can best utilize the talents, the knowledge that is on the dais over the course of the day, and then engage them in conversation and sustain it afterwards. Enjoy lunch. We're going to have the next presentation over lunch, and I'm told there's a critical pathway to lunch, and that is you must have your tent sign in front of your seat, and because that's how they're going to identify who gets fed what. So if you, like me, prefer not to have leftovers, get this tent sign out in front. We'll see you in a little bit.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good job.